Here we go. Bitcoin. Let's start from the beginning. So, got the white paper here. I'll zoom in for you. Let me just check this. Make sure it's good for you. Oh, wrong one. Crypto screen. There we go. That's a good size for you. So, Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system by Satoshi Nakamoto. Now, I've got a website and I've done an article alongside this, and there's even a video on it if you want to keep going back to it. We do a deep dive into all of it. So it's gonna take the video took an hour. This stream will probably be like a bit longer than that, just because I can take my time with it. I can explain stuff a little better. I did the video yesterday, so maybe I'll be able to explain it better, because there were some things in the video yesterday where I wasn't completely happy about with the explanation. So let's give it a go, eh? Right, so we'll start on here. Bitcoin explained. How does BTC work? So BTC is just the abbreviation of Bitcoin. So if you see BTC, that just means Bitcoin. It's just the representation of the word Bitcoin. And the white paper is just it's the research paper that got released, and it basically started all of Bitcoin. And the geezer that released it is Satoshi Nakamoto. So let's do a deep dive. So what made me do this stream and what made me do this video was I wasn't happy with my fundamental understanding of the basics of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. So over the last few days, I've dove down deep. My first stream on this was a few days ago, and I basically just checked it out and saw what was what. So in October 2008, Satoshi Nakamoto published this paper right here. He published it on a newsletter, like a cryptographic newsletter. It went out to a bunch of people, and then it got spread about the internet, and it did take off. A lot of people had a look at it, and basically it's explaining how we can safely use a digital currency without running into problems that we've ran into in the past. So this is a way around of all the problems. So in January 2009, a few months later, the Bitcoin network went live, and Satoshi Nakamoto was the one who coded it, and the very first block was also mined when it went live. So as soon as he released the network, the very first block, which is called block 0, was mined, and the first block is usually called the Genesis block. So in blockchain, the first block to be mined is the Genesis block. So let me just go into Satoshi Nakamoto. Let me dive down him a little bit. So nobody actually knows who this person is. It could be a guy, it could be a girl, it could be a group of people, it could be a business, it could be anybody. So nobody actually knows who this person is. So in December 2010, Satoshi Nakamoto became inactive in the development of Bitcoin and stopped posting on the Bitcoin forums. So nobody's heard of him or her since. And when he launched the Bitcoin network, he also launched a forum for people to talk about Bitcoin. So that was the Bitcoin Talk forum. So you can go down there, you can actually read stuff that Satoshi posted. You can go and dive down his history, his or her history, and read it all. So that's pretty interesting. So 2010, the guy disappeared, or the girl disappeared. Rumors spread, people think he's dead. People think Satoshi's lurking in the shadows as some sort of crypto Jesus, but they are just rumors at the end of the day. Every now and then you'll get some random geezer popping up claiming they're the real Satoshi, but the community just fucking destroys them, man. They're quick to denounce them. They pick it apart, they say, well, you can't be this because you can't do this, and it just doesn't make sense. So if you have someone who's claiming to be the real Satoshi, it's most likely bullshit. So just beware of the scammers out there. They will try and there's so much money in this crypto space that people will try and get money out of you. So don't fall for bullshit like that. So until someone can come and move. So when Satoshi launched the network in 2009, he actually pre-mined 1 million bitcoins. So there's 21 million bitcoins that are possible, in total, there are 21 million Bitcoins that can be mined. There's like something like 17 million currently in circulation, so there's still a lot more to mine. And because Bitcoin gets more and more expensive, like I'll get into that later, don't worry about that. So basically, on Satoshi's known addresses, there's 1 million Bitcoin, and until somebody comes and moves one of those Bitcoin from one of those addresses, like, there's just nobody knows who Satoshi Nakamoto is until that happens. So if some geezer pops up and says, look, I can move Bitcoin out of one of Satoshi's addresses because I have the private key, I am Satoshi, I can move this stuff, this is me. Like, the question of who is Satoshi Nakamoto is just going to basically remain unanswered. So nobody knows who he is the gist of that, or she is. So Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. So what this basically means is peer-to-peer is one party speaking to another party with nobody in the middle. So if I was to speak to you and you were to speak to me with no person in the middle, that would be peer-to-peer. But the problem with cash and the way digital currencies currently work, so like the current banking system, we have a third party in the middle, which is a bank. So in order for me to send £10 to you, I've got to send £10 across, it's got to go through the bank, and then the bank sends it to you. So like the bank's in the middle, and that verifies the payment. So that is actually important, and we'll dive like deep into that in a minute. So where do we go from here? So we've given the £10 example. If we go to Bitcoin as an example, if I were to send you 1 Bitcoin, which is a ridiculous amount of money, the Bitcoin would go straight across and it would go straight into your account. There's no third party in the middle. There's no financial institution in the middle that like can check that payment. So it goes from me to you. That's how it works. And you can send it back the same way. There's no financial third party in the middle, which is very important. So a trusted third party is actually important for the current banking system because of the double spending problem. So what is the double spending problem? We're going to dive down that. So let's say we've got a normal amount of money. So say like we've got £10. If I give you that £10, I no longer have that £10 because I've handed over my £10 to you. But you could argue that I can make a fake £10, but that's just incredibly difficult to do. With digital money, say like I've got £500 in digital money. What this actually is like it's a digital signature and a digital file. So I could actually duplicate this digital file, or I could like falsify it, and I could send this £500 to someone over there, someone over there. So basically I could send the same £500 to multiple people, which is called the double spending problem. So I could send it to you, I could send it to my mum, I could send it to a business, and like I'm using the same £500 for multiple different people, and nobody knows any different. But with a middle party, they can verify that basically what you're sending is you've only sent it once because they verified that it's not been sent to anyone else, so you can actually trust that the £500 you've received off me is legit and it's not duplicated, and nobody else has got that as well. So that's the double spending problem. So how does Bitcoin actually get around this double spending problem? Now it's pretty interesting. So using a combination of, there's some buzzwords here. Using a combination of blockchain technology, cryptography, digital signatures, and network timestamps, Bitcoin runs on a hash-based proof-of-work system. So we're going to dive down all 7 of those fancy buzzwords. Like in cryptocurrency, there's so many buzzwords that you got to get your head around. But when you do like sort of get, and the problem is some buzzwords mean the same thing. So we're going to explain all of them basically. So let's go. Let me zoom in here for you. That's a bit better. Is that better? Yeah, you can still see it. So using a combination of all of them, the double spending problem can be solved. So let's dive down into blockchain. So what is a blockchain? So a blockchain is a continuously growing list of data split up into blocks and a block can hold thousands of transactions up to 1 megabyte worth of storage, basically. So a block. So imagine you've got a block here. This is a block. You fill this up with transactions. So this gets filled up with daily transactions that happen. So as transactions are coming in, these are getting filled up into this block. When this block fills up, so when it gets to the end, when 1 megabyte of storage is filled, you move on to the next block. But a block does not have to be filled for it to move on to the next block. Now that's important. So it has a megabyte of storage, and then no matter what, when that megabyte's full, it'll move on to the next block. But it doesn't have to fill out. It doesn't have to have its full capacity met. So when a new block when a new block is created, so we filled this out, a new block goes in. This beginner block, this first block, can never be edited ever again. So that's permanently locked in place forever. So it's censorship resistant. Nobody can edit it. It's just, that's locked in place forever. So imagine you're writing a story on a piece of paper. So you fill out your piece of paper, you get to the end, or you finish the chapter, so you're ready to go on to the next bit. If you move on to the second page, so let's say you finished a chapter, or you've run out of space, you go and get another piece of paper. So as soon as you start writing on this second piece of paper, that first piece of paper is locked in forever. So you can never go back and edit it. So if you've made a spelling mistake, you're fucked. So you can never go back and edit it. But with Bitcoin, you don't get spelling mistakes. So ignore that part of the analogy. So that's how it works. Like as soon as you're onto the second bit, you can never go back and edit it. And it requires a ridiculous amount, like an unfathomable amount of computing power to reverse that. And we're going to dive down into how ridiculous that amount of processing power is in a bit. So that's how a blockchain works. Cryptography is a method of securely storing and transmitting data between parties when a third party is involved. So if I send you a message without encryption, you can see it, I can see it, and the third-party messaging app that we're using can see it. So say we've got a third-party messaging app that we're using. I send a message, goes through them, and then it goes to you. And if that third party lets other parties, like advertisers and people like that, look at your messages as well, they can see it. So with encryption, what that basically does is I can send you a message, and then you can read that message, and only us two can read it. The third party can't read it. Other advertisers and third parties that third party lets in can't read it. So when I send an encrypted message to you, you can understand it, but the third party can't. So the third party will actually see a big mumble jumble of mess, and it won't make any sense. But for you, it will make sense, and vice versa. If you send it to me, it'll make sense to me, but the third party can't read it. So if something's encrypted, only the two parties can read it and understand it. So digital signatures, let's dive down them. Digital signatures are similar to ordinary signatures, but it's just a digital/online version. Now, with an ordinary signature, you just sign a piece of paper. With digital signatures, you don't physically sign anything, but your computer's doing it. So your computer attaches a signature to a transaction that's happening. So for a transaction to go through on the blockchain, so for a Bitcoin transaction to actually go through on the blockchain, you will have to digitally sign that transaction using your public key and your private key. But the person receiving it also has to sign that transaction as well. So both parties need to provide a digital transaction for the transaction to go through. Now this is important. So they use the public key and the private key to basically sign these. Now I did a full explanation on one of my other articles, how to keep your cryptocurrency safe, and I dove down public keys, private keys, and addresses. So we'll go down them because it's important to know them. So where are we? Public key. There we go. So let's dive down these. So an address. Let's dive down into these. An address is a randomly generated sequence of numbers and letters that can only be used one time. So it's a single use token. Similar, so it's similar to an email address. You can send cryptocurrency to someone by sending it to one of their addresses. So if we go onto the Bitcoin white paper, you can see how it's broken down here. You can see how the transactions actually work. So you've got owner one's public key, you've got a hash, which I'll explain in a minute, and you've got owner's signature, owner zero's signature. Then you've got the private key as well, which signs for that signature. So let's dive, we'll go over them when we've gone over how the public keys and the private keys work. So rather than sticking to one address, a unique address is used for each transaction if you want to be safe. Exchanges and wallets that you use for your Bitcoin transactions and moving Bitcoin about, they generate a brand new address each time you send or receive money. So your private key is generated from a random sequence of numbers and letters that's mathematically related to the address. And so if you wanted to like reverse engineer that private key from the address, it would just take supercomputers trillions of years to actually do that, thanks to cryptography and a load of fucking really smart math people, basically. I mean, you can go and dive down the cryptography behind it, but that's a novel session. Like, do you know what I mean? That's hardcore, that stuff. Maybe I'll make a video or a stream on it in the future, but right now, like, no chance, mate. So, what's important to know is the public key is not the same thing as an address. They are different things, but they are mathematically related. So don't get confused by the public key and the address. They are different things. So a public key is a randomly generated sequence of numbers and letters. An address is a hashed version of the public key. So this moves into the next one, hashing. So let's explain what a hash is. So basically, in like a super simple line I can give you, a hash is a jumbled up version of the original input. So if I have, like, I'm going to use these as an example down here, a Banana 69, and the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So let's go through this paragraph first. A hash is a cryptographic function which takes an input, so like that's a message, data, anything like that. It's like literally an input. You could type it in, that's an input, and it returns, so it sends back to you, so it broadcasts a message on the screen, a fixed length of numbers and letters. So you get a completely different hash if a single letter or number changes. So let's give you some examples so you can get your head around this. So if we input banana 6, these are like really simplified inputs, but if you input banana 6 as an example, when you hash that, you're going to get a random but fixed length string of numbers and letters like this. So if you see, if you input this, you'll get a load of numbers and letters. So A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4, E, F, G, H, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's not going to be that categorized. So it'll be like A, Z, 2, 9, F, Y. Like, it's going to be all mixed up and jumbled, but I've just given it simplified to help you get your head around it. If you change a single letter in banana 6, or like, say like you add 1 onto the end. So if I add like 9 onto the end, banana 69, that'll give you a completely different hash. It won't just change like a little bit of the hash. So say like, it won't go A, B, C, D, C, like 1, 2, 4, 3. It'll give you a completely different, amount of, a completely different string of numbers and letters. So in this example, I've used ZYXW999, like, it'll just be completely different. So if that's a short one, it's going to give you a really long length of like a returned length. If I put in a really long input, so if I put in like the whole Lord of the Rings series, I put all the world building, all the fan theories, all the comments, like if I put all of that into an input, so a big long string of words, and then I hash that, it's going to give me a really shortened version of it, and it's going to be a load of mumbo jumbo, so like IJKL 9876 MNOP, like it's going to return a hash of that, but the hash is going to be significantly shorter than the whole Lord of the Rings trilogy. But like banana 6, like the hash is going to be a lot bigger than banana 6. So that's how hashing works. It basically gives you, you're right mate, in chat, how's it going lad? So it basically gives you a completely different, like, random but fixed length of strings and letters. So that's hashing. So going back to this, a public key is a hashed version of an address is a hashed version of the public key. So the public key is really, 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 really long, and then the address is a hashed version of that. So it's a bit shorter, but it's still really long, and it's just a load of mumble jumble. But the public key and the private key is a load of mumble jumble as well. So like that's how they work. So I explain it here. Hashing is when you take a sequence of numbers and letters and shorten it to a fixed length value. So hashing in this case, it's shortened, but hashing doesn't mean shortened. So it took me ages to get my head around this. So like, don't worry if like you've not like fully got it. Like, dive down it, go on my website, have a read, see how that takes you, see where that takes you. So that's hashing. A network timestamp. So a network timestamp in Bitcoin's case, you can see it here actually. A network timestamp is here. So this is your block. These are your transactions inside the block. So this is a transaction, this is a transaction, this is a transaction. A hashed version of all of this, so all the transactions inside this block can be hashed and turned into a long string of numbers and letters. So that whole block gets turned into a hash, and then that next block gets turned into a hash. So let's explain the timestamp. Y'all, FML look like a mug. Oh, you spelt that wrong, mate. I should stop like interacting with chat. It like makes me lose my thought process. So timestamps, let's explain them. A network timestamp in Bitcoin's case is when you include the time on a hash of a block. So when we hash this block, so when we hash all the transactions in this block, we add a timestamp into this hash. So included in this hash, we put a timestamp. Now let's explain what a timestamp looks like. So in order for me to understand like what the timestamp meant, I had to understamp. All right, not chatting to it. Like, I don't know how to make my moderator. It basically bans anything with a bitch, but I've said don't ban bitch, so I don't know why it's doing that. Like, I've unticked restrict chat language, so we'll see where that goes. So for me to understand it, I had to know what it actually meant when you were putting a timestamp into a hash. So what they do is, it's called the Unix timestamp. So it's like the Unix time. So the timestamp server for Bitcoin uses a Unix timestamp. So what is the Unix timestamp? So basically, on the 1st of January 1970, a counter has been going that started from 0. So ever since the 1970s, a timer has been going up by 1 second since then. So if we go all the way to the 8th of July 2018 at 2016 PM when I wrote this article, the current counter was at 15310887779, and that's been going up 1 second ever since. So that'll probably be like, that's going to be a few numbers above that, but not by much. So because that was a few days ago, it's still going to be a bit higher than that, but that's what a timestamp in Bitcoin's case is. So when you make a hash of all of these transactions in here, you get a random string of numbers and letters, but you also include the Unix timestamp of the time it was hashed. So I hope that makes sense. That's probably the best explanation I've done of it yet. So like I said here, each timestamp includes the previous timestamp in its hash. So this forms a chain that reinforces the one before it. So because the timestamp's included in this, when this is like hashed again, so when you move on, you won't be able to unravel that. So the timestamp means that it shows that when the data was like hashed. So you can check that timestamp, and that timestamp, with the way hashes work, like I said before, if you change a single number or a single letter inside that hash, it gives you a completely different hash. So if you wanted to unravel all that, like, it would require a ridiculous amount of proof of work. So this moves on to the proof of work bit, which is really like interesting and baffling. So that moves nicely onto the next bit. So let's dive down proof of work. Now this is a heavy chapter. So here's the proof of work chapter. We're going to explain all of this as best as I can. So proof of work is a way to prevent spam and denial of service attacks on a network. So you'll have heard DOSes and DDoSes before, like especially if you're into like your gaming and all that stuff. You know what you've heard of DDoSes, but what actually are they? So if you've got a network that doesn't require any, it doesn't require any effort to connect to it or request anything from it or talk to it, you can basically spam that network. So say like if you've got a load of IPs, it's not actually that hard to make a lot of IP addresses, and you could basically like, sorry, I was reading it. Maybe hashes can be the same. No, hashes can never be the same. So if you've got, say like, going back to this example, banana 6 and banana 69, that hash will never be the same. Like, they'll just be completely different every time. Just because it's like it takes a ridiculous amount of processing power. And this is so long. Like, this is a big, long list, big, long string of numbers and letters. Like, it can never be the same. It'll just, the chances of that is so minimal that it won't happen, mate. So, yeah, you can go to prison for DDoSing. Like, DDoSing is illegal. It's basically attacking a network. It's causing harm to a network, and that network can be used for like businesses, like personal use, like anything. So DDoSing is illegal. And what a DDoS actually is you're spamming a network with a ton of requests, and what you're basically doing is you're clogging up that network, you're slowing it down. Sometimes you can even crash that network by like overwhelming it. So this works by being able to request from the network. Like, it works because it doesn't cost any resources to do it, like, or very little resources and time. So this is where proof of work comes in. If you have proof of work in order to request a network, this means your computer, or you have to solve a problem, or you have to solve a problem before you can request something from that network. So if you had the Bitcoin network without proof of work, I could send thousands and thousands of spammy transactions, like 1p to 1p, different addresses. Like, I could send 1 cent to someone else, and then that person can send it back, and you could keep spamming it, or you could send it to one of your accounts to another account, and you could just spam it and spam it and spam it and really clog up the network and just slow everything down. So that's why proof of work is needed. So what proof of work is, if you want to request something from the network, or you want to send something through the network, or anything like that, you want to speak to it, you need to solve a problem. So what is that problem? Like, let's dive down into that. So I'll finish up that chapter. Proof of work's right here. So we are going to dive down what proof of work is. But basically, proof of work means you have to solve a problem, which it requires a lot of electricity, and it requires a bunch of computer parts. So in order to solve a proof of work problem, you need a computer to solve that problem. And computers are not cheap. And the harder the proof of work is, the more processing power you need, so the better computer you need. And it requires a ridiculous amount of electricity to run this as well. So basically, a lot of proof of work requires a lot of money to actually to go for it. So capture's sort of similar, like that requires like time and human resources to actually solve it. So it's a similar thing, but proof of work, a computer can do it, but it requires a lot of processing power from that computer. So a capture is like a human-based proof of work, whereas proof of work, in Bitcoin's case, a computer can solve it, but it takes a long time for that computer to solve it because the problem's hard to solve. So by combining all of these things I've mentioned above, so blockchain, proof of work, hashes, timestamps, digital signatures, all that stuff, the double spending problem can be solved. So the longest chain of blocks serves as proof for all the previous transactions and is the most trusted because it came from the largest pool of processing power. So basically, the way the chain runs is the more processing power you're putting into the chain, the faster it develops. So if you've got somebody who's on their own here, just doing their own chain, like they're making malicious changes to it, there's more processing power going into that honest chain, keeping it honest, rather than this little side chain that they're making. That's a bit baffling. Don't worry about what I just said then, because that'll make sense later. We'll dive down that later. I'm not going to dive into that. So let's go down proof of work again. Let's actually dive down of what the proof of work is and what the computer actually has to do to solve the proof of work. So we know the computer has to solve the proof of work, but what does that mean? What does it have to solve? So I'm going to introduce nodes here as well. Like, this is a good place to introduce nodes. So the processing power comes from nodes. So nodes is just the computers, and they run the whole Bitcoin network. So computers / nodes, it's just another name for computers, run the network. Now, the beauty about nodes and computers, like, anybody can be a node. You can be a node, I can be a node, my grandma can be a node, a business can be a node, a charity can be a node, anything like that. All you need is a computer. So you can rejoin, you can leave and rejoin this network at will. So if you don't want to do it anymore, you can leave it. And if you want to do it again, you can rejoin it. There's no bar of entry. Anybody can do it as long as you've got a good enough computer, which you don't even need that good of a computer. We're going to dive down into that in a minute. Like, you can be a node, so you can be a computer that helps run the Bitcoin network. So what nodes are commonly, so they're commonly referred to as miners. So like, the analogy for miners comes from this. Like, down here I explain where the miners comes in, so we'll dive down that in a minute. So nodes are basically known as miners. So nodes are the official term. What most of the Bitcoin community and all of the crypto community call it, they call them miners rather than nodes, because miners sounds cool. And miners are basically computers that are running the network. Nodes are running that. So nodes, miners, and computers are just all the same thing, and they're running the network. So how do you run a node? So let's say your computer, you've got a computer, you want to be a node. If there's a low bar for entry, like, anybody can be it, like, what do you actually need to enter it? So the first thing you need to do is you need to download the blockchain. So at the minute, the size of the blockchain is 174 gigabytes. So that's actually not a lot. So my computer has got a terabyte hard drive. That's pretty standard nowadays. If you're buying like a decent computer in 2018, it's going to usually come with like a terabyte of storage. So you could run a blockchain if you wanted from your computer. Even old computers have like 250 gig of space. So there isn't a high bar of entry to be a node. So once you've got enough space, you can download the blockchain. So what else you need to do to run a node? So when a transaction is made, it is broadcast to all the nodes on the network. So if I make a transaction to you, when that transaction goes through, we broadcast it to every single computer or node or miner that's currently on the network, and they start writing it down inside its own block. So like in the block of all the others. So like we said before with the blocks and the way blockchain works, when we broadcast our transaction, it just gets added into a block that all of these computers are filling up. So as transactions are coming in, this block is filling up. It's just filling up with transactions. Our transaction gets put in the middle of this block, in the middle of all the other transactions. So each node collects every transaction that's happening, and it's filling this block. As new transactions are coming in, so as these transactions are actually coming in, each node, so each computer, is simultaneously finding the difficult proof of work for the block. So like we said, the proof of work was a problem the computer has to solve. What it's doing is it's solving this problem in the background while the transactions are coming in. So what is that? So what is it actually solving when we say proof of work? So here we go. Here's a picture of it as well. So you've got the diagram here, you've got the block, you've got the transactions coming in, you've got the hash, and you've got the nonce. So we're going to explain all of these now. So the proof of work in Bitcoin's case requires the node to generate a hash with a certain amount of zeros at the beginning, using a hash from the previous block and a nonce. So a nonce is a number you add on the end to make a hash difference. So that's a bit baffling. Don't worry, I'm going to explain it. So is this like mining the Bitcoins? Think my dad mines Pearl. Is that what you're on about? Yeah, so basically what's happening is your dad is helping run the network. I'm not exactly sure how it works in Pearl's case, because each network is different when you go onto a different cryptocurrency. But if your dad if your dad was to help out the Bitcoin network, if he was to run a node or mine on the Bitcoin network, that basically means he's helping run it, and he's like solving this proof of work. His computer is solving this proof of work problem, and it's like including the transactions in a block, and it's publishing it on the network. And if he wins, which I'll explain in a minute, he gets paid. So in your dad's case, he probably doesn't have a strong enough computer to actually run a whole to solve the proof of work himself. So what a lot of computers do, if they've not got like a really sick computer, or they've not got like a lot of computers working on the same thing, they usually go into a pool. So a bunch of computers will work together to solve the proof of work, and the reward gets split among all those computers. But that's like a whole other topic, so I'm not going to dive down too much into it. So let's explain let's explain this new dad's computer. Like, you just need a really sick computer to like handle this on your own. And when I say computer, it's not even a computer, it's basically like 20 CPUs stacked on top of each other. So do you know what I mean? Like, that's unless he's got like 20 CPUs stacked on top of each other, all working on the same proof of work, like, the chances of solving it are really low, because you're going to be against all the people that are doing that. So let's go through this proof of work bit again. So the proof of work in this case requires the node to generate a hash with a certain amount of zeros. So like we said before, using the previous hash, so the block before it, so let's say the block we've just done, this block here, this whole block, all the transactions inside this get hashed. They get turned into a string of numbers and letters. And then it goes on to the next block. So when you get this next block, what's happening is the hash from this block, so all of this gets hashed, this gets added, and this is used. So this is used to solve the proof of work. And what happens is they hash, so you're hashing the hash of all of this. So all of this gets hashed, and then you use that hash to then hash it again to make a hash that comes out with zeros at the beginning. So it's going to start making sense in a minute. Let's say you've got the previous hash of the block before it. You've got that, so that'll be a random string of numbers and letters. In order to change that, so if I kept hashing that, and then I hash that again, I'd get the same hash. So if I hashed just previous hash, if I just hashed that, I'd get A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Obviously, it's not going to be that straightforward. Like, it'd be a random, like, A, J, M, 2, Z, like, Z. Like, it would come up randomly. But if I hashed previous hash again, so if I hashed the same string, it would put out the same one. So if I hashed previous hash, it would put out that, and if I hashed previous hash again, it would put out A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So what you add on the end is called a nonce, and that is basically just a number that you add on to the end of a hash. So if I add 1, I get a different one, I get a different hash. If I change that, because if you change a single thing and then hash it, it comes out of a completely different one. So because I've changed that 1 to a 2, I'm going to get a completely different string of numbers and letters. And it just keeps on going and going and going. So basically, the proof of work is your computer is hashing over and over again until it gets a hash which presents a certain amount of zeros at the beginning. So it's going to keep going and going and going and going. And when it solves a hash, when it gets a hash that has a certain amount of zeros at the beginning, that's when the proof of work is solved. So let's dive down into like the zeros, so what the zeros mean. So when the proof of work is being solved, there's a difficulty that can be attached to it. So if we were to keep doing this method, it would take a lot, like the probability of getting one with 3 zeros at the beginning would be a lot higher. So the chances of getting 3 zeros at the beginning would be a lot higher than getting 6 zeros at the beginning. Are you do you get where I'm coming with that? So if I wanted to get 20 zeros at the beginning, the probability of finding that hash would be very, very, very low, because the chances of getting 20 zeros in a row from a random hash is just really low. So the difficulty of the proof of work can be changed by increasing or decreasing the amount of zeros at the beginning of the hash that it needs to find. I hope that makes sense. So the harder the difficulty, the more processing power is required. So this is where the 10-minute block average time comes in. So in order for the proof of work to be solved, that means the block gets solved and you move on to the next block. So when the proof of work gets solved, the average time is 10 minutes it takes to solve it. So in order to keep up with like the advancement of technology, so computers are getting better and better every single year. So in order to keep up with that, we can change the difficulty so we keep an average block time of 10 minutes. Now, we want an average block time of 10 minutes because any less than that, and the network sometimes makes errors and it can't keep up with itself. So the 10-minute block time gives chance for all the computers to talk to each other and for them to verify each other. It gives them time. Any less than that, and there's a chance of, it's a very low chance, but you can start getting errors. So they try and keep a 10-minute average block time. And any more than that, and it would just take too long for transactions to go through. So when you see like exchanges and like when transactions are going through, you'll see the buzzword confirmations. And what confirmations mean is it's the number of blocks. So if you see if you make a transaction if you make a transaction from one exchange to the other, so say like you want to move one Bitcoin from Coinbase to Binance, they won't move that. Like, it won't officially go through until 3 confirmations have gone through on the Bitcoin network. So 3 new blocks have been added above it. So usually that'll take 30 minutes, like an average time of 30 minutes to go through, just based on the confirmation. And then that comes back to the proof of work. So based on the hashing, if you've got a block here and you move on to the next one, in order to reverse engineer that, you need to reverse engineer the hash, and that takes a ridiculous amount of processing power. But if you have another block that then goes on top of that, because you've used the hash of the block before it and the block before that, if you wanted to be malicious and like make your own, you would have to reverse engineer the hash of this block, and then you'd have to reverse engineer the hash of this block, which is an exponential amount of processing power. So it's not like plus, it's like times the processing power of this, times the processing power of this. So it's exponential, man. So if you got 3 blocks, it'd be like exponential, it'd be processing power times processing power times processing power, and it just gets more and more like it just gets ridiculously high, the amount of processing power required. So it's not processing power plus processing power plus processing power, it's exponential, it's times in it, so it just gets ridiculous. So you can't, eventually, like, there's no chance. Even just reverse engineering 1 requires a ridiculous amount of it. So to reverse engineer 2 or 3 is just unheard of. Like, people can't even reverse engineer 1, never mind 2 and 3. So that's why this system, this proof of work system, is so safe and secure. Like, in the 9 years this network has been running, nobody has been able to reverse it. Nobody's been able to break it. So it is super safe and it's super secure. Like, that's the beauty of blockchain. Like, it provides censorship resistance. Nobody can reverse engineer this proof of work. It's too difficult. Like, the cryptography behind it is too difficult for computers to solve. And that's a marvel of math and cryptography. That's just like so impressive that geniuses have been able to figure that out. So that's how that works. This is the diagram. So this hash is the hash of this whole block. You add the nonce to make it different. When the proof of work of the block gets solved, so when it finds the hash that it's after, this block gets solved and it moves on to the next block. So then the next block starts. So the nodes broadcast it, the nodes that solves this. So if your computer solves this proof of work, it'll broadcast the solved proof of work. So if it finds it, it'll broadcast to all the other nodes what the correct hash is, and then the nodes will see this, and then they'll check to make sure everything is legit. So they'll check to make sure all the transactions line up with their transactions, and they'll make sure you've not done anything cheeky and like edited it. And then if it matches their chain and their hash, they'll accept it, and then they'll start working on the next block. So they win that block. Whoever solves that proof of work wins that block. And I'm going to explain incentive and like why people would actually, like, why would you run a node? Like, what's the point? I'll explain that in a minute. So let me just finish off with like the block generation line I've got here. So block generation, so solving the proof of work, is a low probability trial and error lottery rather than a complex math problem. So like, let me just load, I forgot to load up Streamlabs. So what this means is like, proof of work isn't solving like a ridiculously complex math problem, like 9999888, like so on and so on and so on and so on, times 99988, so on and so on and so on, or like divided by, and then to the power of, it's not solving something ridiculous like that. It's just trying a load of low probability trial and error problems. So it's just like, nope, that doesn't work, nope, that doesn't work, nope, that doesn't work, and then it finally finds it. So it's a low probability trial and error lottery. That's what it is. So when a node finds the right proof of work hash, it's going to broadcast it. So your computer finds it, it's going to broadcast the correct hash to all the other computers. And if they decide, if they look through it and decide and say that, yep, everything you've got on there matches up with everything I've got on here, you're not cheating the system, you're not being a cunt, you're not scamming anything, you're not editing anything, I accept that. So this is the new one. I'm going to start working on the next block. That block is locked in place forever. So then the new block starts going, and then every single person starts working on this proof of work again until the next one finds it. So the chances of me finding the next one are going to be low. Like, someone else is probably going to find it, and then they're going to broadcast the hash that they found, and then I'm going to accept it. If I'm going to check to make sure it's right, and then I'm going to like, okay, that's right, we're going to go on to the next block. Every computer is doing that at the same time on the Bitcoin network. So that's how that's working. So nodes then begin working on creating the next block in the chain using the hash of the accepted block as a previous hash. So let's quickly go over how like somebody could be malicious. So if this is how it works, like all of these people are working on the hash. They're keeping everybody else honest. So if something changes, like if you change a transaction inside that block or anything changes, when you send the completed hash to me, I'm going to see that actually your hash is different. Like your transactions don't line up with my transactions. Something has changed. So I'm not going to accept that your proof of work is correct. So you can carry on building your own little side chain here. Nobody's going to listen to that because it's different to all the honest people. So everyone that's being honest will have the same thing. So if you change anything, it's going to be different. So you just make your own little boring chain over here that nobody gives a shit about. So that's how that works. So let's assume some like geezer, some attacker can access 51% of the processing power. So 51% of the processing power is controlled by one guy, and he controls a bunch of nodes that are trying to attack the network. So they're trying to make changes. Because they have so much processing power, which is just, there's so many honest people out there that are running nodes that it's just impossible to like, it's not impossible, but nobody is going to get like 51% attack. Like it's survived 9 years so far in the early stages, and nobody could do it back then. So like nobody can do it now. Like the amount of processing power you need is just ridiculous. Like it's way too much. So all of these honest people, they're going to be working on solving the proof of work. And because so many people are working on it, the chances of the hash or the proof of work being solved is going to outpace this loner over here that's got like the processing power. But if you have more than 51% of the processing power, then everybody else combined, which is just ridiculous, like it's unheard of, you could, in theory, outwork all of these. So you could find the proof of work before all of these other people combined, and you could start like outworking them. So you could find the proof of work faster. So you could actually run the whole chain, and people would believe that because you're outworking the main chain. So people believe the chain that's outworking all the others. So in theory, the longest chain is outworking all the malicious people because the most amount of processing power of honest people is on the main chain. So that's how that works. I hope that makes sense. Like, I wonder if there's there's no diagram I can use, but if you were to attack the network, if you had 51% of the processing power, in theory you could outwork people, but you're just not going to get that. So let's move on to the incentive. Like, why would you help run the Bitcoin network? Like, what's in it for you? It's all well and good. You want to like nobody, like, not a lot of people will run it for like the sake of it, like just to help people out. Like, people need an incentive to actually run the network. Like, why would you do it? And how do you ensure people don't team up and attack the network just to like fuck everything up for everyone? So when we were going over the proof of work before, like, when you solve the proof of work and you broadcast, so when you put the new block out, so you broadcast the proof of work, and when you include the next block, so when you start the next block, you include a special unique transaction at the very start of the block. So when we said the transactions were coming in, you include at the very start of the block. So when you start working on the block, you include a special transaction inside, and the very first transaction is the block, is your transaction. And what this transaction does, it's unique to all the others. It rewards you. It rewards you for solving the proof of work and helping run the network. So if you find the proof of work and everybody accepts that your proof of work was correct, it wasn't malicious, that first transaction basically rewards you with some Bitcoin. Now, that'll give you a Bitcoin just for solving that block. So when everyone accepts it, you'll get rewarded with a transaction that gives you a certain amount of Bitcoin. So back in the early days, like when you'd solve a block, you'd get 50 Bitcoin. And as the years go on, you basically half the amount of rewarded Bitcoin that you get. So what happens is, as the years go on, you get rewarded less and less Bitcoin. But as the years go on, the value of Bitcoin goes up. So it's like, it's sort of doing this, and it's like it meets in the middle. But basically, every time the block gets halved, you are earning a certain amount, like a little bit more. So that's how that works. And the reward eventually, so that's where this comes in. So let me just go through this next bit. I'll further expand on that. So since all nodes are working on the same block until the proof of work is completed, the first node to broadcast the proof of work becomes the creator and gets rewarded. So because you've pushed out that block, you get rewarded. So you solve the proof of work, you get rewarded for it. That's your incentive. Like, that's why people do it. So this provides an incentive to run a node and support the network. It also slowly introduces more coins into circulation and distributes them fairly. So because all of the coins aren't in circulation at the minute, as people are solving these, they're getting rewarded with coins, and this slowly introduces more coins into circulation, and it distributes them fairly. So compare that to like a financial central authority. Like, they would distribute the amount of money unfairly. Like, they put it to the mates, they put it to certain people, and like certain people that would like follow their rules. Like, it wasn't distributed fairly, and like it was just, central authorities can, like, that's like a point of weakness. Like, they can just be malicious and they can be cunts basically. So this is a way of distributing the Bitcoins to people fairly, and anybody can like get their hands on some Bitcoin. So going back to the analogy I mentioned before, so like miners, nodes are computers, computers and miners. So nodes, computers and miners are all the same thing. They're running the network. It's similar to gold miners using more and more. So the proof of work, if you look at gold miners, their proof of work is getting better and better equipment so they can dig deeper or dig further into the earth to get more gold. And it takes as more gold is discovered, it takes more and more equipment to find gold that's like deeper down. So gold miners use more and more resources to find undiscovered gold. So replace gold and like the equipment to mine gold with processing power and electricity. So processing power is computers. And that basically gives you Bitcoin miners. So that's where the term miners actually came from. So Bitcoin miners are basically like, it's just like similar to gold miners. So that's actually used in the Bitcoin. It's used in here. Gold miners. What's the word? It compares it to that. Oh, I needed that. Woo! So that's how the Bitcoin miner term was coined. So incentive can also, that's one incentive. Now, eventually, since only 21 million coins can be put into circulation, at the minute we're like 17,000, something like that. 17 million, sorry. Cause 21 million can be put into circulation, what this means is, let me touch on inflation as well. So because 21 million coins is the cap, there's no such thing as inflation. So at the minute, with like money, so like your euros, your Great British pounds, like your US dollars, the government and the minting, I don't know what the word is. Whoever's printing the money can just print more and more money. So if you've got £1,000 and you just hold that £1,000 forever, like as more and more money is printed, your £1,000 is going to be worth less. So that's what inflation is. Because Bitcoin only has 21 million possible like in circulation, there's no such thing as inflation when all of those are like in circulation. So if you hold like one Bitcoin, that's going to get more and more valuable because it's impossible to print more Bitcoin. So inflation, it gets rid of the problem of inflation, which is just like mind-blowing. Like it's so creative and like what a system, like holy shit, it answers so many problems. So incentive can also, rather than just getting rewarded as well, incentive can also be funded using transaction fees. So rather than just getting rewarded from solving the proof of work, you can also get rewarded, you can also get paid through transaction fees. So however much it costs to process the transaction, plus some so they can actually make a profit, can be added to the block reward. So you can basically, when all the coins are in circulation, the block reward could be, you get rewarded with how much it costs to process all of them plus some. So you'll get, so you can get some money in. And this is still going to be like, the way the Bitcoin network works is the busier the network, the more expensive the transactions fees, the less busy the network, the cheaper. So sometimes it's cheaper than traditional banking, sometimes it's more expensive than traditional banking. Ideally, the end goal of Bitcoin and the end goal of online money is zero transaction fees, because if you think about third world countries, like Bitcoin for people in first world countries like Europe and America and that, like Bitcoin is actually not that important to them. But if you go into like third world countries or like people or countries that are really struggling like to run an economy, so like look at the mess that is Venezuela at the minute. Their currency basically means nothing. So like it's going like the Zimbabwe route where trillion Venezuelan currency like could get you like fuck all, like a grape sort of thing. Like that's what's happening in Venezuela at the minute. With Bitcoin, if you were to charge like 20p or 20 cents in transaction fees in Venezuela, that could feed them for a week. So the end goal for transaction fees are just like no transaction fees, because it does actually matter for global adoption. If you need global adoption of economy, if you need global adoption of a currency, you need it to be able to work for all those third world countries that aren't as well off as the first world. It doesn't have an economy as big or as large as a first world country. So bear that in mind when people are arguing that like, oh yeah, transaction fees are okay for the Bitcoin network. Like they're not okay. Like the end goal is no. Like they're not okay. Like you want global adoption. You don't want only limited to a few people that have a certain amount of money. Like that's ridiculous. Like the fact that some Bitcoin people say that, it's just, where's their head at? Like what are they thinking? Like, so because of these problems, other currencies have spawned. So altcoins have spawned. Like you'll have heard of Bitcoin Cash. That's like trying to solve that problem. Other currencies like Nano, like I did a whole Nano breakdown, so check out my YouTube channel. Like just scroll down on my Twitch description or go through my YouTube and like check out my Nano. Like you can see as well, if I switch screens for a second, I did a whole Nano breakdown. Go to this website, mojo-crypto.com, or go check that out, mate. So what was I talking about? Well, yeah, I did the whole nano breakdown, and that they charge no fee, so you can move. If I put £500 to you, 500 nano to you, like that doesn't take anything. Like that costs nothing, and it's instant. So nano's really cool and up, but it's not as secure as Bitcoin. So there's a trade-off. Like this is what all these altcoins are competing. Like there's trade-offs in one area for like other trade-offs, and all these Bitcoins are competing and like see who's gonna win. It's fascinating, man. So the incentive also encourages, so you can, with transaction fees, like the incentive is you get rewarded by transaction fees and a little bit of profit on them, and you get rewarded for solving the proof of work and supporting the network. So that's how you get paid. So that's why people do it. The incentive also encourages nodes to stay honest. So going back to, we were talking about attackers before. So the incentive encourages you to actually stay honest and run the network. Because if you attack the network, when you get rewarded Bitcoin, like the value of your Bitcoin is less. So why would you do that? And then B, like there's a few reasons why you shouldn't do it. If an attacker is able to accumulate 51% or more of the processing power than all of the honest nodes, you would have to choose between generating new coins and getting money off them, or stealing back payments they've made. So let's say the way digital signatures work, like if an honest attacker was to control 51% of the network, if we're honest people and we're just making transactions, if I sent 500 Bitcoin to you and you sent 500 Bitcoin to me, like the attacker can't do anything about that. Like they can't suddenly change mine to a 5,000 and to a 500 for you. Like they can't do anything like that because the way digital signatures work, I sign for it and you sign for it. But what attackers can do, if the attacker sends 500 Bitcoin to me and I send him like a pair of 6 shoes that he really wants, like, and he receives them, I send off them shoes, and the attacker can basically change his, they can change it and steal back that £500 because of the way the digital signatures work. He's part of it, so he can basically reverse that. But I've already sent my shoes out, so he gets them. So that's how that works. So if you and your grandma are just like, say like your grandma's got 500 Bitcoins sitting in an account, the attacker can't just go and like erase that. That's not how it works. So even if an attacker does take control, they don't fuck everything up completely. But if an attacker does get control, the value of Bitcoin will drop. So your grandma's 500 Bitcoin will be worth less, but it won't be obliterated, but it might be I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen if a Bitcoin attacker actually manages to get 51% of the processing power. It's just unheard of. No, like nobody's been able to do it so far, and it's only more secure nowadays. Like, just not going to happen, mate. So you'd have to choose between generating new coins, which is just, if you've got 51%, this is where it comes in. So if you actually have 51% of the processing power, you would be earning more coins than all of the other computers combined. So you'll be solving more proof of work than all of the others combined, which means you will be bringing in more Bitcoins than all of the others combined. So like, you're getting a huge monopoly, and like the value that you're going to have, you're generating more value than all of them combined. And there's only a certain amount of Bitcoin, so you're going to be fucking well rich if you are honest and stay stay honest and help the network rather than attacking the network. So if you were to attack the network, you'd like lose money. So that's the incentive behind it. So there is no monetary incentive to actually attack the network, but there is like basically the only incentive to attack the Bitcoin network is if you're a sadist and you just want to watch the world fucking burn, or you just want to destroy it. You're just a cunt. Like, that's the only incentive you have. Or maybe say like you've got better technology, you're an upcoming coin, like maybe you're a better payment coin, or like you're a competing payment coin. You want to attack the network, bring it down so your coin like goes to the top. Like that could be like maybe like a competitory incentive. Is that a word? Competitory. I don't know if that's a word, but you get the idea. Like, no, whatever. No, it's not. So the incentive is like competition, or you just want to watch the world burn. You're just a motherfucker. So all the jokers out there, please stick to the cosplays, mate. Like, don't fucking watch the world burn. Sincerely, everybody. So if you manage to stick around through that, if you manage to get your head around that, and you can like sort of explain that in your own words, you've got a really good understanding of Bitcoin, and like you've got a better understanding than like 90% of people, because half of them, 90% of people haven't read it, and then 5% of people have actually spent the time to like digest all this. So if you can explain all that without like your notes, like you're pretty up there, man. Like not a lot of people can do that. I spent the last few days digesting it. Like it takes a while to go at. So unless you've got an interest in it, like getting your head around all that is baffling. But those are the most important chapters. That's like the first half of the Bitcoin white paper. That's everything up to incentive that we've gone over. So you've still got all these other ones. You've got reclaiming disk space, you've got simplified payment verification, you've got combining and splitting value, you've got privacy, and you've got calculations. So you don't actually really need all of these from now on. So reclaiming disk space and onwards, these are like really specific scenarios and really specific things. Like they aren't that important. They're just like, oh, here's like fun facts. Like they're basically fun facts and niche like specific things. Like everything before this is like the fundamentals, like how the system works, why it works, what makes it work, the proof of work behind it, the hashing, the transactions, the signatures. Those are like the key important bits. So if you know all that, you've smashed it, mate. And then the final bit is the further study and the advanced stuff. So I touch on this very briefly. It won't take that long to go through this. As I just said, like if you know all that, you're pretty Gucci. Like somebody just stopped watching, so like glad I could help you out, mate. Like there you go. So let's go down the advanced nerdier stuff. So if you can understand and explain in your own, oh, I've already mentioned that. So blah blah blah. So reclaiming disk space. Let's go over that. Let me have another swig, mate. Oh, shall I do some ASMR for you? You ready? Wait. Sorry, that wasn't good ASMR, was it? I hope that was nice for you all. I'm going to be an ASMR streamer after this. Right. Reclaiming disk space. So, basically, if you were to leave all of the transactions in the blockchain, it would take up a lot of space. So you can actually reclaim some disk space by like hashing it all. But the problem with hashing, like we said, if a single thing changes in a block, like it goes back to the hashing, you're going to break the hash. So how can we get around that? So you can use something called a Merkle tree. I'm not going to dive into that because it's a bit baffling, but basically what this allows you to do is it allows you to hash things without breaking the hash that makes the whole blockchain work. So if we look at the diagram it gives here, the way it works is you've got all these transactions going on here, and these take up space. So basically you can hash and block these together. You can like chunk them together. So you can turn hash transaction 1, transaction 2, you can hash that and turn it into one string. Rather than 2 strings, you can turn it into 1, which takes up less space, but it doesn't break the hash of the original block. And then you can just keep doing that. So you can just reclaim disk space. So that's how that works. It just saves a bunch of space, so it stops it. It keeps the blockchain more accessible to more people. Since it takes up less space, you don't need as expensive storage, so it allows more people to access it. And you'll have heard as well, like the Bitcoin Cash and the Bitcoin like dilemma, they're arguing about block size. So what Bitcoin Cash has done, they've actually increased the block size to 2 megabyte. And Bitcoin's argument is like, when you go to 2 megabyte, the amount of storage is required is a lot more. So people in third world countries have less access to it. So that's Bitcoin's argument. It's all to do with the block size and how much space it takes up. But the more space you allow in a block, the busier the network is able to be without charging ridiculous transaction fees. So you can fit more transactions in a block, but the storage is more. So it's like a trade-off. But like in December or January, it would stop the clogging up of the network. You can fit more transactions in a block, so it'll stop the network from clogging up. So that's how that is. That's how that works. Basically just clears up space for your computer. Simplified payment verification. Now, to me, this is the most baffling part of the whole fucking white paper. I just don't think it's very well written. Like, if I'm honest, like, I don't know, like, it's hard to get your head around. Like, I've read it so many times, and it's just a bit obscure. Like, it's not very clear. So I'll try my best to explain it my way. So, simplified payment verification. Basically, you can verify a payment without running a full node by keeping a copy of the block headers and of the longest proof of work chain. So you don't have to, like, in order to check that your transaction is actually on the blockchain, like, you could download all of it and then look at it and see if it's there. But there is a way to do it without downloading the whole blockchain. Basically, you can just download, so all of these, the longest chain basically means is the most honest one. That's the longest chain is the honest one. That's where the most amount of processing power is. So that's the legit one. You can basically download the block header, which is just a hash of every single block. So all of the blocks that are on the blockchain, rather than downloading all the transactions and all the blocks inside you can just download a hash of every single block. So it's a lot smaller. But obviously you don't have the transactions included in that. But what you can do with that, once you've downloaded all of the block headers of the longest proof of work chain, you can query full network nodes. So if I was running a full network, you could basically query me and send my computer a message to check that you're working on the longest chain. So you'll just query it and say, oh yeah, you're working on the longest chain. And when you're happy, you can obtain the Merkle branch by linking the transaction to the block it's timestamped in. So whatever the timestamp was of your transaction, you can find that. You can find the block where that timestamp is, and then you can basically see if it's in there. But you can't see the transaction itself. Don't confuse it. Like, you can't actually check the transaction, but you can see that a network node has accepted the timestamp. If the timestamp is the same, that means the network node has accepted it by linking it to a place in the chain. So since the timestamp is included in the chain, you can assume that your transaction is in there without actually seeing the transaction. And the more blocks that are added on top of that, remember when we said like the proof of work before, like how it's exponential to reverse it, the more blocks that get added basically confirms even more that the network has accepted it. So when you're like 2 or 3 blocks in, like it's basically a definite that your transaction is there as long as the timestamp is the same. Like, explaining that then, like, the bit that confused me when I was getting my head around this is he can't check the transaction for himself, but by linking it to a place in the chain, he can see that a network node has accepted it. It's this was the line that baffled me. But by linking it to a place in the chain, like, that's just poorly worded. Like, I think what it means is it's linking to the timestamp, but linking it to a place in the chain, linking to the timestamp in the chain is what I'm assuming it means. Like, that's the only understanding that makes sense to me, but maybe someone else can come about and explain it better. But I'm pretty sure that's like at least 90% accurate. So the last few, combining and splitting value. So transactions contain multiple inputs and 2 outputs to allow value to be split and combined. So say like we wanted to send $5, rather than each coin in that transaction, so rather than making a separate transaction for every cent, like in that £5, you can basically move it all as one transaction, so you can combine values. So if you're moving like, say like £2.50, like you wouldn't have to move 250 cents, like you can combine it and move like 500 all in one go, but like that'll be listed as like $5 worth. So there's also 2 outputs as well. Here's a diagram for you to help you out. So you've got multiple inputs included in one transaction. So rather than just 1 in and 1 out per transaction, that would mean you have to like 1 cent out, 1 cent, like you'd have to have a lot. So basically you can just include like 1 cent, 1 cent, 1 cent up to 5. You could have 500 in there to represent $5, and then multiple inputs mean you can combine it into one transaction. It just stops you clogging up the network, basically. And then you've got two outputs. You've got one, which is the payment, and then you've got another one which will just return any change. So if you send someone a fiver, but you're buying something that's only £4.50, you just send a fiver, whatever. That'll basically, the output will be, okay, we're accepting £4.50, and then okay, not 50 cents is going back to the user. So that's what that is. There's two outputs and as many inputs as you want. So that's combining and splitting value. That one's like quite easy to explain. Privacy. So this is pretty much the end of it now. So privacy. With the current banking system, access to your privacy is limited to the parties involved and the bank. So it's like it's sort of private. So only me and you can see a transaction between us. But the bank, well, me and you can see a transaction between us, but the bank can also see that transaction, and whoever the bank lets in. So a bank could let a third party, they could let the law enforcement to look in and see it. So it's not completely private, it's not public, but it's not completely private. So it's a bit of in the middle. With Bitcoin, you can keep like complete privacy by keeping your public key anonymous. So what this means is every single transaction that goes through is already made public. So if you make a transaction with me, that transaction gets published and anybody in the world can see it. But nobody's name, mine and yours name, isn't tied to that transaction. So the only thing they can see is the transaction. They can't actually see who made the transaction. That's the beauty of it. It's like it behaves similar to stock exchanges, if you've ever had a look at them. Like, it's public, but nobody can tie that transaction to anyone. But that's how it works in theory. But the problem is the majority of users access Bitcoin through services that require full disclosure of their identity. So your age, your name, your telephone number, photo verification for some exchanges. So say like Coinbase, or Binance, you have to give them a name. Or actually Binance, you don't have to put in ID verification. So Binance is pretty cool if you want to stay anonymous. But things like Coinbase, they require photo ID, age, name, telephone number. So the problem is you run into the same problem with the bank then. Like the service that you're using, they can see what you're using and what you're spending your Bitcoin on. So they can actually track your transactions. So they can also let third parties in. So they could let other people in, including law enforcement, and they can see what you've been up to. So it is possible to stay private with Bitcoin, but you just can't use one of these easy services. Like, you can't use one of these services that make life easier. So you'd have to use like old school things or exchanges that don't require ID verification, basically. So that's how that is. So privacy is possible. So that's important to know, that privacy is possible, but you just can't use some of these services that take that privacy away, because they can look at what you're doing and they can let others look at what you're doing. So if you are going like the old school route, or like you want to use like paper wallets as well, so a new key pair needs to be used for each transaction if you want to keep your privacy. So that's why I don't encourage you, like, beginners to use paper wallets, because every time you make a transaction, you need to create a new paper wallet, which is just a fucking faff, mate. It's a ball ache. So a new key pair needs to be used for each transaction. Otherwise, people can start connecting the dots and like, oh right, he did that, so oh, they did the same. Like, they can start connecting things. So a new key pair is needed. So like, remember when we went over the key pairs, like the private key, the public key, and the addresses? You need new addresses each time. That's what that means. So last but not least, woo, we made it. So that was the traditional privacy model we just went over as well. So you got identities, transactions, trusted third party, which is the bank, the counterparty. So in this case, we've got both of our identities. I send a transaction to you, it goes through the bank, it goes to you. Well, it goes to your bank as well. So that my bank, your bank, it goes to you. but nobody from the public can actually see that. So that's not broadcast to anybody. With Bitcoin, our identities are kept anonymous, but all the transactions are public. So everything we do is public, but nobody can tie it to us. So I think that's fucking cool as shit, man. It's just so interesting. The last but not least, the calculations, right? You can see on my website here, I put calculations, next joke, I'm not Big Shaq. Go and read the white paper. Basically, the calculations are so like complex, like I can't explain it to you right now in my current understanding of it better than the Bitcoin white paper can explain it to you. So go onto the Bitcoin white paper, go to the calculations section at the end, have a read through. Like, you've got some baffling formulas down here. Like, we can sort of touch on it, but I'm gonna go through it. But my understanding is not the best. I'm not much of a math guy, but it's pretty cool nonetheless. We'll touch on that at the end. So the Big Shaq joke, 2 + 2 is 4 - 1. That's 3 quick maths. Like, that's basically like the extent of my math knowledge that we're going to touch on. So fuck that. Go and look at it yourself. It's a lot better. It's a lot better explained than I have, than I can. So ending. So let's end it. Last words, summary. So this is basically my ending, my summary of it. Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer system for electronic transactions that removes middle parties and relies on trust. So what that basically means is there's no bank in the middle. We can do all of our transactions online, and it's based on trust. Like that we can just, when we send money to you, we know that it's legit. Like, through the way the whole system works is we know it's legit. Then we know we can't get scammed. There's no double spending. There's no cheat in the system. That's it. The double spending problem can be solved by using a combination of blockchain technology, digital signatures, timestamps, cryptography, hashes, and proof of work. A public record of transactions that cannot be censored or edited due to a specialized network of nodes, i.e. computers, i.e. miners. They're all running, so computers are running the whole network. With a low bar of entry, any computer can join or leave the network at will, accepting the proof of work chain as what happened while they were gone. The longest proof of work chain as what happened while they were gone. With no central authority, the Bitcoin network is a decentralized group of computers which can vote with their processing power. As long as the largest pool of processing power belongs to honest nodes, the network will run fairly and attackers won't make any progress. Nodes are kept honest through incentive rewards. Boom! That's it. That's the Bitcoin white paper, ladies and gentlemen. We fucking made it. Like, how do you feel? Like, whoosh, that was a bit of an information overload. Like, I've gone through this so many more times. Like, going through this every time further cements my understanding. Like, I sort of understood this bit a lot better. Simplified payment verification. Like, that was a bit baffling yesterday, but I've got my head around that a bit more today. So when I explain this, it just further cements my understanding. So I suggest you try and like explain it to like your mate or someone who's interested, because it really helps. It really helps you like knuckle down on the things that are actually a bit confusing for you. So try explain it, try different methods of learning, watch videos, read through it, try and explain it yourself, try and write it out like I've done. Like, I'm pretty happy with my explanations now, because I've done, I've read the white paper like 5, 6, 7 times, and I've spent a decent amount of time reading paragraphs over and over again. I've gone through like other people's videos. I've made my own video. I've done 2 live streams where I basically explain it as best as I can. I've written a whole article. So all of that has given me a pretty good understanding of it. And there's still bits and bobs that aren't 100%, but that's just the process of learning, innit? You'll probably learn it faster. You might learn it slower, but just keep at it and it will get there eventually. Like, if you go back and watch my latest VOD, like, I was going through it and I didn't know what a DDoS was. I didn't know what proof of work was. I didn't know what the digital signatures were. The only thing I knew when I started this was I knew the Satoshi Nakamoto situation. I knew what peer-to-peer electronic cash system meant. Like, there was no third parties. I knew how to explain blockchain, but other than that, like, everything else I've had to learn, like, in the last few days. So, wow, it's been fun, man. Like, it's when you're going through the Bitcoin white paper and you finally understand like a paragraph, like, the feeling you get is like, holy shit, I actually get it, man. It like feels good, man. Feels good. Like, I definitely suggest you try and proper get your head around it. Like, this shit isn't going anywhere, and the sooner you understand it, like, the more advantage you have over everyone else. Think about the internet. If you started getting into the internet when it first came out, like, you had a head start over everyone else. So get in there, fucking graft, mate. Get stuck in. There's a lot of fucking money in this space, and it's interesting. It's basically the next internet. Like, it's that big. So dive down the fundamentals, dive down all the other cryptocurrencies, get involved. I'm going to end on a few things. I've got, let me switch to the big screen for you. I've got all my websites here. Check all these bad boys out. MojoCrypto.com. My Twitter, MojoCryptoJoe, with underscores. MojoCrypto on Instagram. Twitch is there. Snapchat's there. If you go on my YouTube, they're all listed. If you scroll down on my Twitch, they're all listed. Check them out. I post different content on all of them. Instagram's basically pictures and memes. Twitter is my opinion. My website is like my super explanations, which I've actually spent a lot of time going through. My YouTube channel is full of different things. Let's have a look at the YouTube. You can find loads of different things on there. Basically, you've got the how does Bitcoin work? That's the one we've just done. Types of cryptocurrency coins. This will be interesting for you if you're new to the space. Basically, I dive into all the different types of currency coins, like all the different types of tokens and coins. So you've got payments and currency coins like Bitcoin, Litecoin, Nano. You've got decentralized apps and platforms. You've got Ethereum, things like that. You've got privacy coins. Like, I just dive into all of them. If you check out my YouTube, every single article I do is accompanied by a video. Some of them are ridiculously long, but sometimes the topics are massive. Like, the Bitcoin video I did is 58 minutes long. The different types of cryptocurrency is 44 minutes long. The Nano one's 20. Another thing I think you'll want to have a look at is how to invest in the right ICOs. It's basically altcoins and ICOs explain it. It basically explains how they work and what to look for, how to avoid scams. So if you are looking at investing in this space, you need to avoid like the scams. Like, there's a lot of scammy shit that goes on in cryptocurrency because so much money is involved. So basically, I give you a rundown on how to avoid them, what to look for, what makes an ICO good, what makes it fair, what you should avoid, how to launch, like what you should look for when they're launching, how it, like, just the professionalism of it all, like how to dive down the team, make sure the people are legit, like all that good stuff. So that's my website summed up. My Twitter, you can find me on here. Go follow me on Twitter. If you follow me, I'll love you forever. I tweet randomly loads of different things, my opinions on things, reblogs of my other stuff, when I'm going live, when I'm streaming, all that good stuff. So what else? That's about it, I think. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Like, I've got like 8 subscribers at the minute. Like, whenever it goes up by 1, I'm fucking over the moon. So do me a solid. Instagram, if you follow me on there, I'll love you. Just slap me with follows. Like, it actually helps. It keeps me motivated. It's fun as fuck. Like, let's the end goal of this, like, this Twitch stream and like all the other stuff, I just want to build a crypto community full of enthusiasts that are just trying to help people learn. They're calling out people's bullshit, like getting rid of scammers, and we just want to make a cool little group of crypto enthusiasts. Last but not least, I'll end on the Discord. Check out my Discord. We've got fuck all people in there at the minute, but I think it'd be really cool to get a bunch of people in there. You can just discuss cryptocurrency, discuss anything. I'm in there chatting most of the day with people, so come and have a laugh, come and ask me questions, come and explain stuff better than me. If you're a smart cookie, come and explain it. I think that sums up everything. Follow me on Twitch if you're not already following. Like, it means the world to me. There we go. Stay tuned for more. The next one is probably going to be Ethereum. So I'm gonna, before I move on to the next stream, I'm going to read through the Ethereum white paper on my own first, because when I read through the Bitcoin white paper the first time streaming, it was just a bit of a shit show. So I'm going to give it my own read first, and then I'm going to explain it and write my whole learning process and writing process and go down it with you to help you learn, and we can all learn together. We can all explain it. You can like all that good stuff. So that's it. That's a summary. Stay tuned for Ethereum. Stay tuned for Monero. There's a few other ones I've got my eye on that I really want to dive down. If you have any suggestions, hit me up. I'll try and get through it. If you have any questions, hit me up. If you've got, if you want to make a video, you want to make a podcast, you want to collaborate with anything, fucking go for it, mate. We'll smash it. Let's go. Thanks for watching. I'm going to end the stream. Love you all. I managed to keep a consistent view count. We're happy days with that. Love you all. Mwah! Hope I helped. Peace. Whew, what a sesh. Jesus. Stop streaming. Love you.